The DA has spent a week in the U.S. engaging with key decision makers across Congress, the State Department and the White House. This according to DA spokesperson on international relations and cooperation, as well as MP Powell. And she was on the show a little earlier on. And let's get the reaction now from the government on this. We're joined by Chrispin Phiri, Department of International Relations and Cooperation spokesperson. Good evening to you, Mr. Phiri, and thank you so much for your time. So, your reaction to the visit?
Well, as we have said, in response to other queries around this matter, the Democratic Alliance is not a state actor, so it's not accurate that they represent the government. And indeed, the positions that they have represented would probably be an accurate representation of their policies. But insofar as a government being represented, it's only within the remit of the state and the Foreign Affairs Department and the presidency to articulate South Africa's foreign policy. And we continue to do so with various interlocutors. Before
you move on, Chrispin, please allow me, before you move on from that point, right? They say, and in their words, that they are the second largest party in this government of national unity, and that is the reason why they believe they are representing the people of South Africa.
No, they're a non-state actor. The Constitution is very clear on where foreign policy resides. It's within the remit of the executive. It's not within the remit of parliamentarians or opposition parties or friends like these or any other lobby groups. It's within the remit of the executive, which is represented by the foreign minister and the president.
When you look at the fact that they're saying, although you say that, yes, they are not a state player and all of that bad, they met, according to them, with key decision makers, including advisors to the Secretary of State, that's Marco Rubio, and they also talk about some significant people, lawmakers, Congress as well. And they say that this was to open communication channels and for them to give accurate and fact-based information to the United States regarding South Africa's domestic landscape as well as challenges that South Africa is currently navigating. I wonder, why have you not been able to secure a meeting?
We have been engaging at various levels. Ambassador Rasool, who is the appointed representative of South Africa by the Foreign Affairs Ministry and the President directly to represent South Africa in the US, has been engaging various interlocutors in Washington, as well as in the corridors of Congress and Senate. What we have said quite clearly is that a number of the key interlocutors that we would want to engage around very important issues are not yet in place. As you know, this is 40 days into the US administration. So a number of key appointees are only being confirmed recently. So for that matter, some of the interlocutors that we think are crucial to engage are not yet in place. For example, the US Trade Office is something that's not yet in place. The appointee for Africa is not yet in place. So there are a number of interlocutors that we think are of immense importance that have not yet taken office. But that is not to say that diplomatic engagements are not at all happening. It is not to say that we have no communications. As you would have seen, we've been able to confirm a number of things that have come from the US through the diplomatic channels. Yes, in some ways, some of the engagements from the US have been unconventional and have not taken the form of the diplomatic channels, but by and large, we have seen a number of engagements coming through the diplomatic channels.
Okay,
so we continue to engage. The diplomatic channels are well-founded and fully existent.
A couple of questions arise from what you just said. The first one, you say that key appointees, are still not in place at this moment. So are you saying that they potentially met with possibly lower-ranking officials and not necessarily the people? But I'm just asking.
I think it's for them to explain who they engage and
they
why
say that they engaged. They say they engaged with key decision makers.
That we would want to engage from our perspective, because you would analyze who are the key decision makers, who are the people who are responsible for certain policy outlooks. In our perspective, those appointees are not yet in place. Mm-hmm. So those engagements have not happened. But it's not to say that no engagements have happened at all. There are engagements that have taken place with various interlocutors, including even outside of government as well. You might know that in the US, there are a number of very strategic think tanks that often shape how the US policy outlook gets formulated, implemented, and implemented by the US administration. So we would also engage those from a particular perspective. But from where we are sitting, those with a very strategic vantage point that we think are relevant from our perspective have not yet been put.
All right, let's get some clarity though, Chrispin. Are you worried as the department with the people that they say they met? Because they seem to suggest that they even got the ear of those who advise the Secretary of State, right, who will be crucial in these conversations. They also say they spoke to lawmakers, they spoke to Congress and all of that. So are you worried at all about that? I know you say that the people you want to speak to are yet to be put in place, but are you worried as the government about that at all and the message that maybe they would have sent them?
Look, governments of any kind do engage various non-state actors of the world from various countries. So that the engagement has happened is not something that is unusual within the diplomatic space and within foreign affairs and how it gets practiced within this day and age. We would also, to some extent, engage non-state actors where we want a different perspective about what's happening in any country. So that element is not something that is completely unfounded. But what we would be concerned about is if someone says, well, this is the South African position. No one has the authority to say that this is the South African position other than the government of the day.
It sounds to me, though, right, when you listen to what Emma had to say, in part, she also says that we had to even explain to them that there is no majority government in South Africa. There's a coalition government, and we are doing everything we can as one of the players within that, government of national unity. She describes it as a coalition, of course, and says that they're doing all they can to, speak about the foreign policy, speak about and all of that, and addressing some of the concerns that she says they had. And she says, I quote, the concerns they've got about the foreign policy agenda, positions, engagement of South Africa with Iran, ICJ court action. And she says that they were telling them there is no majority in South Africa.
Well, look, people have their own perspectives, and at some point they may want to export those perspectives on what the current prevailing situation is in South Africa. And we've seen that play itself out in various ways with even other non-state actors. But the fact of the matter is that the authoritative position on what is the political situation in South Africa, what our foreign policy is, why we have engagements with other countries, is the preserve of the government. And we present those positions without fail. And by the way, I might add to you, Ms. Swani, that it is known in foreign policy circles that you do not take the position necessarily of a non-state actor as the gospel. You have to then engage the government at the end of the day to fully understand what is the true perspective of that country, because the people with the real political power to implement a policy and to implement a particular policy is that of is the government of the day. It's not a non-state actor. Yeah. The people who have a monopoly on state power, if you like, are the government that are elected. And yes, our government is a government of national unity. The US knows this. Minister Lamula's one of his first major visits was to the US to really outline this policy, to say that, well, we now have a government of national unity. This is what it means for our foreign policy. Essentially, our foreign policy will still continue to be non-aligned, and we will continue to pursue our national interests as we see them necessary to pursue.
So you do then have, though, some who are saying that things are being done in such an unconventional way that they may not engage the government, because you've seen what has been taking place on social media, and even how the US government has been responding to various number of key issues. So what happens if Pretoria still has to wait for a couple of months without this particular answer of this particular meeting, and things just simply continue to develop? Are you not creating a vacuum?
Let's dismiss this idea that Pretoria is just sitting and waiting for something to happen. Like I continue to stress, Ambassador Rasool is hard at work in the corridors of Washington. He has a number of engagements with various actors. What we want to do is have engagements with particular actors who we know are responsible for various policy positions. Those actors are not yet appointed or are still undergoing their various administrative processes. So let's rid ourselves of this notion that we are not engaging Washington. We are. And we have the means to. But we will do so when we think we are now in a position to fully do so with the United States. And that requires all of the dominoes to be in place, and there are various elements of that. So the idea that no, we are not engaging in Pretoria sitting and watching social media, not the case at all. And also, quite frankly, no serious country can run its affairs on foreign affairs based on social media. No serious country can take the gospel of non-state actors as the total representation of what's happening in the country and make decisions based on that. And if they do, you do run the risk of being wholeheartedly embarrassed and ultimately making very, very wrong decisions.
So just before I let you go,
we will hope that we will continue to engage with the US.
Just before I let you go,
whatever decisions they take, they believe that they're in the national interest, at the very least must be based on accurate information, which can be verified by the relevant authorities who have the competency to do so.
So the Supreme Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court rather, in the US has rejected Trump's request to keep billions in aid frozen. How do you react to that?
That's the domestic affairs of the United States. We wouldn't want them opining on a constitutional court decision in South Africa, and we're not going to opine on their own domestic affairs. And they've taken decisions based on whatever they are pursuing in their domestic policy, and we note that. And we will have to then act in accordance with what we think is necessary to ensure that those decisions do not harm our citizens.
All right. So, Chrispin, thank you so much for your time. That's Chrispin Phiri, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation spokesperson, saying that Pretoria is hard at work to ensure that it secures this meeting with the U.S. government, saying that key appointees are still going to be appointed. Others are in the process of going through administration. The trade office is not even in place just yet. So Pretoria, he says, is not sitting idly. In fact, it is working towards ensuring that there is a meeting with U.S. lawmakers there. So certainly a lot to be said about this one as it continues to develop in the public domain.